Yeah! Hey there, wrestling fans. Welcome back. Today I'm taking a look at Fire Pro Wrestling D for the Dreamcast. This is just one in what seems like an endless line of Fire Pro Wrestling games. They were originally developed by Human Entertainment, the same developer as the Clock Tower series, but in 2000 their development was taken over by Spike, the same developer as the Dragon Ball Z Sparking series. This game was released only in Japan in March of 2001, and the roster definitely reflects that, though the roster, which is filled with unlicensed knockoffs of famous real-life wrestlers, is one of the more entertaining aspects of this game. Their names especially, which I must admit are pretty inventive. Right off the bat, I'll address the graphics in Fire Pro Wrestling D, which I must admit don't necessarily take full advantage of the Dreamcast hardware. That might have something to do with the hundreds of wrestlers to choose from, and perhaps because Spike didn't want to make a game that differed too much in appearance from the older games in the series, which were very beloved by many. I can actually appreciate the graphics here though. They sort of remind me of some of the 16-bit wrestling games that I enjoyed a lot as a kid, just with a few upgrades. The entrances do suffer a little though. The sound design is also very simple. There aren't a whole lot of tracks in the game, and the entrance music for the wrestlers seems to have no real rhyme or reason most of the time. For instance, Revin Cash, enters to what sounds like a knockoff of Eye of the Tiger. Not sure what the connection is there. Also, there are voices for the wrestlers, and they do say some of their famous catchphrases, or at least variants of them, but it just sounds kinda off. The sound effects are decent though, and the music during matches is pretty good, so I'll just stick with referring to the presentation in Fire Pro Wrestling D as simple. Disregarding the cosmetics though, the gameplay in the Fire Pro Wrestling series has always been fun, and surprisingly deep as far as options go. The wrestling itself is very easy to control. You have some strike buttons and a run button, and you engage in a tie-up anytime you and your opponent come into close quarters, and the winner of the tie-up is decided by timed button press, and you have a whole lot of moves to perform from this position depending on what button combination you press, including wrestlers' signature moves. Also, as you might expect, you can perform submission holds on downed opponents, jump off the top turnbuckle, dive to the outside of the ring, all of that fun stuff. Also, there are a lot of well-known mixed martial artists in FPWD, and they all have a rather different set of moves from the pro wrestlers. In fact, you can even choose to have a match in a cage under UFC rules, referred to here as gruesome fighting. Now, finally, we can find out what would have happened if Hulkamania made its way to the UFC. Spoilers, Hogan still celebrates for a half hour after every match, regardless of the outcome. And while I'm on the subject of different gameplay modes, this is a game that is chock full of them. In addition to standard wrestling matches and the aforementioned gruesome fighting, you can also enjoy the frantic nature of an 8-man battle royal, which can itself be held under a number of different rule sets. You can also engage in the fun of a barbed wire death match, where basically you can hurt your opponent by throwing them into the turnbuckle or to the outside of the ring, and it's fun to see them get a little bit of color. ECW! ECW! Can't forget about the explosive cage death match. Here, throwing your opponent into the cage causes an explosion and does some decent damage, again getting them nice and bloody. And if the match runs 15 minutes, the clock counts faster than real time, you're treated to a nice big explosion that takes everybody out. And whoever actually gets back up at the end of that is the winner. Very FMW. You can also organize your own leagues, and 16-man tournaments, have elimination tag matches a la Survivor Series, and even edit your own championship belts. Load the belt to the VMU, put it on the line against your friends! You could even take your belts online and defend them there, which must have been a lot of fun when, you could still easily play Dreamcast games online. All in all, Fire Pro Wrestling D might not look like much. Outdated graphics, laughable knockoff names, and weird sounding wrestlers, but it has it where it counts. It's fun, and there's a ton of different ways to play. If you're bummed that it never came out in the States, don't be. Fire Pro Wrestling Returns was released internationally for the PlayStation 2, and it's basically an updated version of D. So if this looks like fun to you, then I'd recommend it. Especially if you're a big fan of wrestling. Dig it!